So now I give you my insight into the most important and the major aspect of Précis writing, and that is regarding the management of the subject matter or the total idea of your Précis. At this point, I will first of all ask you to once again recall to your mind the basic definition and the original concept of Précis writing. Précis writing is basically a compressed or shortened or cut short version of the main idea or the essence or the quintessence or the theme of the original paragraph or passage. In order to manage this theme, first of all, please keep in mind that Précis writing is basically an exercise in comprehension. How is it possible that you can make a good Précis whereas you were not able to comprehend the original theme of the original paragraph? It is completely impossible. So if you want to improve your skill of Précis writing and you want to come into a position where you can make a reliable Précis, first you have to work on improving your skill of comprehension. And in order to improve your skill of comprehension, the best advice that can be given to you is that you read text extensively and you read text intensively. Now, when I say that you are supposed to read text extensively, it means that you consume volumes of text. And when I say that you read text intensively, then it means that you read the same paragraph or same small portion of some text again and again and again, so that all the possible aspects of that one selected short piece of writing becomes totally clear to you. Now, at this stage, I believe that most of you must have ample experience of reading text like paragraphs, passages, essays, columns, editorials, blogs, etc. And if you really have that experience of going through all these things, then you must have come to notice that generally a paragraph, which is the basic building unit of all these elaborate pieces of writing, is composed of three different types of sentences. We can very easily classify those sentences on the basis of their importance into three different categories. Number one, those sentences which are very, very much important and they actually make the main idea or the central idea of the whole paragraph. This is basically the controlling idea of the paragraph, and this contains the main thesis of the actual author or writer. Second, those sentences which are essentially needed to give further explanation and logical rationale of the thesis or the argument of the author, means these sentences always go with the main idea to make it further clear and understandable. And the third category of sentences is those sentences which are not very essentially needed in order to explain the logical core and context of the idea. So in order to make a good Précis, you must be able to scrutinize your ideas very carefully, and when it comes to the discussion on the methodology of making your Précis, then I will explain it further. But in advance, I can only give you this very important tip that you can mentally make three imaginary containers and you select all the very important basic central controlling idea of the paragraph and you put it into one container and you write the words central idea imaginarily on that container, and then you make a second container and the second category of ideas will be put into this container, and the words tag of this container would be the most essential details that will go with the main idea. And then you will also have a third container in your mind, and the words written on this container, you may make a guess, will be waste bin, and you will put all the unnecessary ideas into this container. And then later on, when you are supposed to make the actual Précis, rather a draft Précis in your rough work, you will first of all remove this third container and you will have the remaining two containers. You will mentally accept the thought of the remaining two containers, the central idea and the most essential details of the central idea, and then you will make your précis. Initially you will make this précis in the rough work that will be called draft précis, and then you will make a neat précis later on. But I will discuss the details of all this process, and then I will be discussing the methodology that you have to apply to make your précis. At the moment, the message is simply this much, that in order to make a good précis, you must be in a position to scrutinize your ideas, separating the most important main idea and the relevant, essentially needed details of that main idea. And now I tell you how to do your practical work and what type of methodology to apply to make your précis of the given paragraph or passage. At this point, first of all, please keep in mind that you should not spend more than 40 to 45 minutes to make your précis. And this is particularly with reference to CSS examination. And in order to make your précis, first of all, you should select the last page of your answer book for your rough work. And in the rough work, first of all, you should hold your paper in your hand. You are making a quick reading of the paragraph in the very first step. When I say quick reading of the paragraph, it means that you are not stopping again and again and reconsidering sentences, and you are just following one sentence after the other and making a smooth reading of the paragraph. Quick reading does not mean that you are, quick reading does not mean that you are reading at such a quick pace as if police were running after you. No, it does not mean that thing. You only read the paragraph at a normal pace, the pace at which you generally read newspapers, editorials, columns, essays. And there are three most important purposes of this first quick reading. The very first purpose is that you are able to understand the general idea of the paragraph. It normally happens that we read columns of the newspapers and editorials only once, and we trust ourselves that by making this one reading we are able to understand the basic argument of the writer. So in order to start your practical work, the first advice is that you make the quick reading of the paragraph. The second benefit that you can achieve by making the first reading is that you will be able to identify certain areas where there are certain confusions, and after identifying that area you can further concentrate on this area to make your confusions clear. And the third benefit is that you are able to understand as to what are the stages of the development of thought. Now I tell you that generally the writer starts a particular argument with one initial sentence that will be called the beginning of the paragraph, then he explains certain points, and finally he arrives at a certain inference or conclusion of the paragraph. If you are not able to clearly identify these different stages of the development of thought, then at least you will be able to understand the two very simple stages of the paragraph. That is the very first sentence or a couple of sentences which make the very first part of the paragraph, and the very last sentence or a couple of sentences which give you the whole conclusion of the paragraph. Now, this is a general understanding that in 80% of the cases, the very first sentence embeds the essential idea or the main idea of the paragraph. Alternatively, it is the very last sentence that gives you the actual argument or the main idea or the central idea of the paragraph. So if you concentrate your attention only on the very beginning sentences and the very last sentences, most probably you will be in a position to understand the whole main idea of the paragraph. And if you actually succeed in finding out the main idea of the paragraph, your success starts from this point. because now you will be in a better position to select which sentences are essentially needed to further explain this central idea and to provide the logical support of this argument, and which sentences are not essentially needed. And then what you can do further is that you will keep on reading sentences again and again for the next 20 minutes. And in the next 20 minutes, you will do all the mental work. You will be holding your lead pencil in your right hand or your left hand with whatever hand you write. You will be having your rough work page in front of you. You will be holding your actual paragraph in your left hand maybe. You will be reading sentences again and again, and you will be making all the scrutiny of whether this sentence is essentially needed, whether this sentence is not essentially needed, and then you will keep on selecting all the sentences and piling them down on that rough paper on which you are actually selecting the right context, the right ideas. So what is actually happening at this stage? It is that you are reading sentences from the paragraph, and then you are selecting some of the sentences for your future précis, and all such sentences are being transferred to the rough page that is in front of you. And if there are certain sentences which are not considered essential, you are just leaving them here on the question paper, and you are not selecting them for your précis. After all this activity of 20 minutes, now what you have done up till now is that you have applied some 25 minutes. You spend this much time to just make the mental work. At the end of this work, what you have got is that on your rough page, you have all the important ideas in front of you. Now you will once again consider these sentences and try to give them a shape of the paragraph. And while you will be giving them a shape of the paragraph, you will be using the same rough work page. And when it will come into the form of a paragraph, this will be called your draft précis. Why we call it a draft précis? Because here we give you some room to make certain amendments and to edit your paragraph. And after editing your paragraph, you will be having almost a final version of your précis. Now what you are supposed to do next is only you will just rewrite these ideas on that page where you want to present your actual and final précis. Thank you very much.